Either you sell your apartment and save our family, or we're getting a divorce. Her husband issued the ultimatum, slamming a stack of bills onto the table. I stared silently at his anger-twisted face and at the papers, but one document, accidentally falling out of the folder, revealed a secret that made him go pale. Rachel loved quiet autumn evenings. Outside the window of their cozy two-room apartment in Boston, rain drizzled, washing away the city's daytime dust and bustle. An apple pie was baking in the oven, filling the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and baked apples. Mike, her husband, was expected back any minute. 5 years of marriage had flown by like a single day. Rachel still remembered their first meeting at a contemporary art exhibition, where her friend Olivia had dragged her along. Mike, tall, confident, with intelligent, laughing eyes, had approached her himself. They talked for 2 hours, forgetting about the paintings and the noise around them. He spoke of his ambitious projects at a small IT company, and she, a 32-year-old freelance graphic designer, shared her dream of creating a series of illustrations for her favorite book. A year later, they married, took out a mortgage on this apartment, and began building their nest. Rachel, or Ray, as Mike called her, was truly happy. She felt as if she had drawn the lucky ticket. Mike was caring, attentive, always giving her flowers for no reason, and admired her work. "You're my genius," he would say, kissing the top of her head whenever she showed him a completed project. Lately, something had changed. Over the past couple of months, Mike had become jittery and tense. He came home later from work, citing a difficult project, and increasingly buried himself in his phone, quickly minimizing apps whenever she entered the room. Rachel tried not to notice. Everyone goes through tough times, she told herself. She cooked his favorite dishes, tried to create a calm, cozy home atmosphere so he could relax after a hard day. But the tension didn't lift, it hung in the air like an invisible cloud. "Hi, love." Mike's voice from the hallway made her flinch. He entered the kitchen, as always, with a smile, but his eyes were tired, and faint lines had begun to form at the corners of his mouth. "Hi," Rachel hugged him, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with dampness from outside. "How was your day?" "Same as usual." He sank wearily into a chair. "A disaster. Can't get anything done." "Baking a pie?" "The whole hallway smells of it. Your favorite, apple and cinnamon." "I'll make some tea now." They sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and eating pie. Mike spoke about a new client, about disputes with his boss, but Rachel felt he was withholding the main truth. His stories had gaps he carefully filled with trivial details. Suddenly, his phone, lying on the table, vibrated. The screen lit up. "Lucas." Mike immediately rejected the call and flipped the phone face down. "Who's that?" Rachel couldn't help asking. "Oh, just a colleague," he replied hastily. "Always calls at the worst times." "Don't worry about it." But Rachel knew all his colleagues. Lucas wasn't among them. She stayed silent, but the anxious little worm inside her stirred with new force. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That evening, when they were already lying in bed, Mike hugged her tightly. "Rachel, you do love me, right?" he suddenly asked, his voice tinged with desperation that made her heart clench. "Of course I do," she whispered. "What's wrong, Mike?" "You can tell me anything." "Nothing." He buried his face in her hair. "Just tired. You know, we'll need to have a serious talk soon. About our future." "Our future?" Rachel was surprised. "We already planned everything, bedroom renovation in the summer, a trip to the sea." "Yes, about the future," he repeated quietly. "Just know, no matter what happens, I love you more than life itself." These words, meant to reassure her, only made her more uneasy. She lay in her husband's arms, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Some trouble was standing at the door of their home. And Rachel didn't dare imagine what it could be. Over the next few days, tension at home grew. Mike became even more withdrawn and irritable. Any question about money triggered an outburst of anger. When Rachel reminded him it was time to pay the mortgage, he barked. I know, it's not small. Before, they always planned their budget together. Now he stopped talking about work, and every attempt she made to draw him out was met with monosyllabic replies. Everything's fine, just tired. Rachel felt a glass wall growing between them and didn't know how to break it down. She even called her best friend Olivia. Olivia, hi. Listen, I don't understand what's going on with Mike, she shared, stirring her now cold coffee with a spoon. What happened? Olivia's lawyerly voice was always clear and businesslike. He's not himself. Nervous, secretive. He's dropping calls, speaking in riddles about the future. I'm worried he has problems at work. Or a mistress, Olivia suggested ruthlessly. No, that's impossible, Rachel replied firmly, though her heart skipped a beat. I would feel it. This is something else. Rachel, you know me, I don't beat around the bush, Olivia sighed. I said from the beginning that your Mike is too smooth. Perfect husband, perfect son, that doesn't happen. Everyone has their skeletons. He just hides his really well. Be careful. Okay? If anything, call me immediately. The conversation with her friend didn't calm Rachel, it only intensified her anxiety. And on Saturday, like a bolt from the blue, her mother-in-law showed up. Paula had never been a frequent visitor. She lived on the other side of the city and preferred her son to come to her to pay respects. But this time she called and announced without a word of preamble, Mike, I've missed you. I'll be there in an hour, and I'll bring cabbage pies. Paula was a commanding woman, with a sharp, assessing gaze and a habit of speaking in hints that cut deeper than direct reproaches. She swept a critical eye over the apartment from the threshold. Dusty, Rachel, she observed, running her finger along the hallway dresser. A man comes home to relax, not to breathe dust. I just cleaned yesterday, Rachel tried to defend herself. Well, you cleaned poorly, her mother-in-law cut her off and moved into the kitchen as if she owned the place. Mike, son, you've lost weight. She's not feeding you enough. Mom, stop it, Mike grimaced, though his voice sounded uncertain. All evening, Paula launched an assault. She criticized Rachel's cooking. The beet in the soup should be grated, not chopped. She criticized her appearance. You could have worn a dress instead of those jeans, looking like a teenager. She even criticized her work. Drawing pictures and sleeping on the job, that's not serious. I worked my whole life as a chief accountant, now that's a profession. Mike sat silently, buried in his plate, making no attempt to defend his wife. Rachel felt a boil of anger inside her, but she held herself back, not wanting to start a scene. The climax of the evening came with a discussion about the grandmother's apartment. Oh, your one bedroom is just sitting empty? Paula asked casually, pouring herself more tea. Such an asset lying idle. You could rent it out, every penny counts. We're fine for now, Rachel replied politely. And tenants are such a hassle. Hassle, snorted Paula. When my son is working hard to pay the mortgage. Every penny counts. You sit at home doing nothing. Money should work, not lie there like dead weight. Especially when the family isn't running smoothly. She cast a meaningful glance at her son, and Rachel understood, these were not idle words. It was preparation for something bigger and more frightening. Something was brewing, and her mother-in-law clearly knew what was going on. Mom, we'll handle it ourselves, Mike finally spoke, but his voice was so weak that Paula didn't even notice. Of course you will, she said condescendingly. The main thing is not to be too late. People get into debt, and then the family suffers. Especially the wife, if she's smart and far-sighted. She spoke the last words while looking directly into Rachel's eyes. Her gaze held a mixture of contempt and a kind of malicious anticipation. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. She no longer doubted it. Her mother-in-law was not just aware of Mike's problems. She was an active participant. Her visit was not accidental, but a carefully planned operation to manage her daughter-in-law. What Rachel had feared happened 2 days later, on Tuesday. Mike came home from work earlier than usual, pale, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He silently went to the kitchen, dropped his briefcase onto a chair, and sat down, burying his face in his hands. "Mike, what happened?" Rachel approached him, cautiously touching his shoulder. He flinched as if struck. "It's over, Rachel, it's the end," he whispered, without lifting his head. "The end of what? What are you talking about? Did they fire you?" He looked at her, and in his eyes was such an abyss of despair that Rachel felt a cold wave inside her. "I wish they had fired me," he said bitterly, smirking. "It's much worse." He unfastened his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and with a dull thud, dropped it onto the table. Papers fanned out from the folder, official forms with stamps, notices, some spreadsheets filled with numbers. "What is this?" Rachel stammered, sitting across from him. "These are our debts," Mike said, his voice breaking. "Actually, mine." He pushed the folder toward her. Rachel took the top sheet with trembling hands. It was a consumer loan agreement for $50,000, taken out from some bank she didn't know. Beneath it was another one, for $30,000. And then more. There were even agreements with microfinance organizations charging monstrous interest rates. The total amount printed at the bottom of one of the notices made her gasp. $500,000, she managed to exhale. "How?" Rachel looked at her husband. Mike finally decided to tell her. His story was disjointed, full of self-justifications and self-pity. It turned out that about a year ago, his old friend Lucas, the same one who had called him recently, had proposed a hot business project. Some kind of ultra-profitable investment in a startup related to cryptocurrency. Guaranteed profit, a fast rise. Mike, who had dreamed of a glamorous life, of paying off the mortgage quickly and buying an expensive car, fell for it. "I first invested our savings," he said, staring at the table. "The $15,000 we had set aside for vacation. I thought I'd turn it over quickly and get it back with interest. But the project demanded more investment. Lucas said it was fine, that we needed to wait, to reach a new level. I took the first loan. After that, everything was like a fog, one loan covered another. When the bank stopped giving money, I went to microfinance organizations. The startup went bust. Lucas vanished. And the debts remained, with interest, penalties, and threats from collectors. Why didn't you tell me?" Rachel looked at her husband, torn between horror and bitter pity. "Why did you keep silent?" "I was afraid," he admitted. "I was ashamed. I'm supposed to be the man, to provide for the family, not drag it into a debt pit. I kept hoping I could sort everything out myself. I thought I'd take another loan, cover the most urgent payments, and figure something out." He shook his head. "And I figured no. Today, the bank's security service called. They said that if I don't start repaying the debt within a month, they'll sue and demand the seizure of property, our apartment." Rachel went numb. The apartment. Their nest, into which they had poured so much effort and love. The mortgage they had been paying faithfully for 5 years. All of it could be sold at auction, because of his stupidity, because of his secret ventures. "But the apartment is mortgaged," she weakly protested. "They can't take it away." "They can," Mike cut in. "If it's the only residence, then no. But you have another one, the one from your grandmother. The bank's lawyers will find out quickly. They can place a lien on it, on our accounts, on everything." Rachel sat stunned. The world that had seemed so stable and reliable was collapsing before her eyes. The husband she loved and trusted turned out to be an adventurer and a liar, dragging their family into a monstrous debt pit. "What do we do now?" she whispered, rifling through the terrifying papers. Mike approached her, knelt down, and laid his head on her knees, just as he used to in the early years of their marriage when he wanted to apologize for some small thing. "Rachel, my love, forgive me." His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I'm such an idiot, I've ruined everything. But we can fix it. There's only one way out." She looked at his trembling back, at the blonde hair she had always loved to run her fingers through, and she already knew what he would say. The same solution his mother had so transparently hinted at. "We need to sell your apartment," he said, sobbing. "Your grandmother's. It's the only way to pay off the debts and save our family. Please, Rachel, don't refuse. You don't want us to end up on the street, do you?" He lifted his tear-streaked face to her, full of pleading and hope. At that moment, Rachel felt not pity, but an icy jab of fear. This wasn't just a conversation about money, it was a test of everything she believed in. And she understood, this conversation was only the beginning. Rachel's first instinct was to scream, to release all the horror and resentment suffocating her. But she held back. Her husband sat before her, crushed and frightened, and instinct told her that now was not the time for accusations. "All right," she said quietly, moving his hands off her knees. "Let me study everything first. We need to understand what these debts are, what the terms are, what the interest rates are." Mike nodded eagerly, looking at her gratefully, like a beaten dog. He had apparently expected a scandal, tears, reproaches, but her calm disarmed him. Rachel didn't sleep all night. She sat in the kitchen with a calculator and a stack of papers, trying to make sense of the convoluted loan agreements. The numbers were monstrous. Interest rates at microfinance organizations reached several 100% annually. The total debt, including penalties and fines, had already exceeded $600,000. By morning, her head ached, her whole body ached, but a clear picture had formed in her mind. They were trapped. When Mike came into the kitchen in the morning, Rachel sat at the table with a cup of cold coffee. "I've gone through everything," she said in a steady voice. "The situation is catastrophic. Selling the apartment is a last resort. First, we need to try restructuring the debts, consolidating all the loans into a single one at a proper bank, with a reasonable interest rate. I've already tried." Mike waved his hand. "I've been rejected everywhere. With a credit history like this, no one will give me a new loan." "They won't give it to you," Rachel corrected him. "But they might give it to me. I'm a mortgage borrower, I pay on time. I have a stable income. Maybe it will work." A flicker of hope appeared in his eyes for a moment, but it immediately faded. "And what will we do while the bank considers the application?" "Collectors call every day, threatening us. We'll ask our parents for help," Rachel said firmly. "Both mine and your mother. We'll explain the situation. Maybe they can lend us part of the sum to pay off the most predatory microloans." Mike grimaced. "My parents can't help. Their pensions are tiny. And your mother? You know, she counts every penny too. But she's your mother." Rachel couldn't contain herself. After all, these are her son's problems. That same day, they went to see Paula. Rachel had called ahead to request a meeting, saying it was a serious discussion. Her mother-in-law greeted them with an expression as if she already knew what it was about. She silently listened to her son's disjointed story, occasionally casting sympathetic glances at her daughter-in-law, which made Rachel feel nauseous. "My God, son, how did this happen?" she exclaimed, throwing up her hands when Mike finished. "I felt something was wrong. This friend of yours, Lucas, I always knew he was no good." She hugged Mike, stroking his head like he was a child. It's okay, we'll figure something out." Family is for supporting each other in hard times. Then she turned to Rachel. My poor girl, how awful it must be for you to hear all this. But you're clever. You have to understand, Mike didn't do it out of malice. He wanted the best for the family. Men, they're like children, easily carried away. Rachel gritted her teeth. This performance was disgusting. She clearly understood that her mother-in-law had known everything in advance and was now just playing the role of a sympathetic mother. Paula, Rachel interrupted. This is not the time for sentimentality. We need your help. We decided to try taking a loan in my name to refinance Mike's debts. But we need an amount to pay off the microloans. Could you lend us some? Her mother-in-law's expression changed immediately. Sympathy vanished, replaced by firm business-like resolve. Lend? Child, where would I get the money? I'm a retiree. I have a small savings for a rainy day, but that's for funerals, she finished tragically. Mom, maybe at least something. Mike pleaded. 10,000? Paula looked at her son as if he were crazy. I've been saving that money for 10 years, denying myself everything. No, son, it's impossible. I can't risk my future. She paused, then added, looking at Rachel. But there is a way, and it's obvious. Rachel, you have to sell your apartment. But it's a memory of my grandmother, Rachel objected. Memories are memories. But living people are more important, her mother-in-law snapped. This is about saving your family, your husband. Can any apartment be worth more than that? You're a wife, you should be with your husband in sorrow and in joy. Now you have sorrow, and your duty is to help him. I'm trying to help. Rachel exclaimed. I'm ready to take the loan myself, risk my reputation. That's all half measures, Paula waved her off. Loans are a new kind of bondage. Here's real money, sell the apartment, pay off all the debts, and start life anew. Isn't that what you want? She spoke so convincingly, so logically, that Rachel almost gave in for a moment. But something inside resisted. This was her apartment, the only thing that belonged solely to her. Her quiet haven, her safety cushion. I need to think, she said firmly. There's nothing to think about. Her mother-in-law exploded. While you're thinking, my son will be flattened by the collectors. Is that what you want? You want him to suffer because of your stubbornness? What a selfish woman you are. Mom, don't, Mike tried to stop her. And what do you mean don't? Paula wouldn't relent. I'm speaking the truth. I thought you had a decent wife, but she's ready to sacrifice her husband for some concrete walls. Rachel stood up. Thank you for your hospitality, Paula. We'll be going now. Go, go. She shouted after them. Think carefully, Rachel. Your family is at stake. The whole way home, they were silent. Mike sat with a guilty look, and Rachel stared out the window, feeling her heart turn into an icy lump. It was no longer just a request for help, it was blackmail. And she understood, this was only the beginning. The following days turned into a living hell. Mike's phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers. He flinched at every sound behind the door. But the worst part wasn't that. The worst part was the psychological pressure that fell on Rachel. Paula called several times a day. Her tone shifted from accusatory to pleading. Rachel, darling, I just want what's best, she cried into the phone. Mike is completely worn out. He's not eating, not sleeping, I'm afraid for his heart. And it's all because of these debts. Just sell that miserable apartment, save my son. You love him, don't you? Mike wasn't far behind. He followed her around the apartment like a shadow, with eyes full of universal sorrow. Rachel, I know I'm asking a lot, he began every evening. But we have no other choice. You see what's happening to me. I'm on the edge. If you don't help me, I don't know what I'll do to myself. He didn't say it outright, but the hint at suicide was more than transparent. Rachel trembled from these conversations. She felt cornered. On one side, her only property, her independence, memories of her beloved grandmother. On the other, the threat of a broken family, a sick husband, and a sobbing mother-in-law. They pressed on the most vulnerable points: her love, her sense of duty, her fear of losing what she had built for 5 years. She almost gave in. One night, after another hysterical call from her mother-in-law, she told Mike, "Fine. I agree. I'll put the apartment up for sale." The relief on his face was so genuine that she felt a little lighter. He hugged her, kissed her, thanked her, swore he would carry her in his arms for the rest of his life. "You saved me, Rachel. You saved us," he whispered. In the morning, while Mike was in the shower, Rachel called Olivia. "I gave in," she said hoarsely into the phone. "I'm selling the apartment. Are you out of your mind?" Olivia's voice was sharp. "Rachel, don't do this. Do you even understand what's happening? They're breaking you. What am I supposed to do?" Rachel sobbed. "He says he'll kill himself. My mother-in-law calls and cries. I can't handle this." "Wait, stop," Olivia commanded. "No tears. First of all, this is classic manipulation, cheap blackmail. Second, you don't have the right to make such a decision in a state of emotion. Did you give him your word? Yes. Take it back. Tell him you need time to think. And most importantly, demand every single document related to these debts, all contracts, all statements, all receipts. Tell him your lawyer, that's me, wants to review them before you put the apartment on the market. He won't agree." "He will," Olivia said confidently. "Where will he go?" "He thinks he already has you in his hands." "Rachel, dear, don't rush. Please, don't rush. Something about this whole story doesn't sit right with me. Everything is too smooth, too theatrical. Give me time, I'll try to check something." The conversation with her friend sobered Rachel a little. She felt she wasn't alone, that there was someone looking at the situation clearly, without emotion. That evening, when Mike brought up the realtor again, she gathered all her willpower and said, "Mike, I'm not reneging on my promise, but before I start the sales process, my lawyer wants to review all the documents regarding your debts." Mike tensed. "Why? What difference does it make? A debt is a debt." "There is a difference," Rachel replied firmly, repeating Olivia's words. "We need to see the full picture. Gather all the papers down to the last receipt. Without that, I won't do anything." He looked at her suspiciously but didn't argue. Apparently, he decided it was just a female whim that could be indulged, since the main goal was almost achieved. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll bring everything tomorrow." The next day passed in oppressive anticipation. Rachel felt like she was walking on thin ice. She didn't know what Olivia was looking for, but she trusted her professional intuition. In the evening, Mike, as promised, brought the folder. "Here," he threw it on the table. "Everything's here. Let your lawyer look it over, just make her hurry. Time is running out." He went to the bedroom, slamming the door demonstratively, leaving Rachel alone with the ominous folder. She photographed all the documents and sent them to Olivia. The response came almost immediately. "Received. I'll review everything tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, hold on and don't give in to provocations." At night, Rachel still couldn't sleep. She wandered through the dark apartment like a tiger in a cage. Thoughts swirled in her head. Was she doing the right thing? Maybe she should just sell the apartment and forget everything, as if it were a terrible nightmare. She approached the window and looked out at the night city. Somewhere out there, In one of those glowing boxes, her friend lived and was possibly now unraveling the mystery of her husband. In the next room, he himself was sleeping. The man she loved, but whom, as it turned out, she didn't really know at all. She felt as if she were standing on the threshold of some revelation that could either completely ruin her life or, on the contrary, give her a chance to fix everything. 2 days passed. Olivia remained silent, answering messages briefly, working. Wait. Mike and Paula, on the other hand, intensified their pressure. Her mother-in-law called every hour, her voice becoming increasingly demanding. Well, Rachel, has your lawyer looked at the papers? When will you start selling the apartment? Time is running out. Mike stopped playing the victim. Now he was cold and sharp. I don't understand why you're dragging this out, he said, drilling her with his gaze. I gave you all the documents. What more do you need? Have you changed your mind? I'm waiting for my lawyer's response, Rachel repeated, worn out, though her own patience was nearly gone. She felt that they suspected something, that their plan was starting to crack, and it enraged them. The atmosphere in the house became unbearable. They barely spoke, and when they did exchange words, it was only in raised voices. Rachel tried to spend more time outside the house. She went to cafes with her laptop, worked in the park, anything to avoid his judging gaze and the incessant calls from his mother. On Friday evening, when Rachel returned home, Mike was waiting for her in the hallway. He was clean-shaven, wearing a neat shirt, but his eyes flashed with lightning. Next to him, on the ottoman, sat Paula, arms crossed over her chest like a general before a decisive battle. We need to talk, Mike said in an icy tone. Again, Rachel sighed wearily. I think we've already discussed everything. No, not everything. He blocked her path to the room. I'm no longer willing to wait. My patience has run out. I gave you a chance to help me save our family. You didn't take that chance. I never refused to help, Rachel protested. I just wanted to understand the situation. Understanding is pointless. Her mother-in-law intervened. There's a debt, and it must be paid. And you've created a circus with lawyers, wasting time, mocking my son. Rachel looked at her and, for the first time, felt not fear but a cold fury. This is none of your business, Paula. This concerns only me and your son. Oh, it's none of my business? She bristled. When my child is on the verge of a nervous breakdown because of your callousness, is that not my business? Mom, shut up, Mike cut her off. He turned back to Rachel. I'll put it bluntly. Today, right now, you call the realtor and put the apartment up for sale, or what? Rachel asked directly. He took a deep breath, summoning his courage, and said the very words Rachel already knew, yet which still made her heart freeze. Either you sell your apartment and save our family, or we get a divorce. He stepped toward the table, grabbed the folder of documents, and threw it forcefully onto the floor in front of Rachel. Papers scattered all over the hallway. Look at this! He shouted, his face twisted with rage. See the scale of the disaster. Is this what you wanted? To push me to the edge, to divorce? Congratulations. You did it. Paula watched the scene with barely concealed satisfaction. Her face red. Finally, my son has shown character. Rachel silently stared at her husband's enraged face, at the papers strewn across the floor, at her triumphant mother-in-law. Her whole world, so cozy and proper, lay in ruins at her feet. And in that moment, she felt neither pain nor despair, but a strange icy calm. As if the storm that had raged inside her for weeks had finally subsided, leaving behind a scorched but clear emptiness. She bent down slowly, very slowly, to gather the papers. Mike and his mother watched her every move, expecting tears, hysteria, or pleas for forgiveness. Rachel picked up the papers one by one, loan agreements, notices, payment schedules. And suddenly, her eyes caught a document lying slightly aside, almost under the dresser. It was different from the others. It wasn't an official form, but a regular receipt, long, like those issued at supermarkets. It had apparently fallen out of the folder when Mike had thrown it on the floor and gone unnoticed. Rachel picked it up. Her heart started pounding wildly. She ran her eyes over the lines. It wasn't a credit document. It was a detailed record of bets from a bookmaker. Dozens of sports bets: football, hockey, tennis. The amounts varied: $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. Almost all losing bets. And at the very bottom was the total loss for the past month: $300,000. $300,000. In a single month. On bets. Rachel slowly lifted her head and looked at her husband. He was still standing there in a triumphant pose, waiting for her response. He didn't see what she was holding. He didn't know that his carefully constructed lie had just crumbled. Unsuccessful investments, you say? She asked softly, almost in a whisper. Mike didn't understand. The crypto project your friend recommended? She continued in the same steady voice, sending chills down Mike's spine. She slowly unfolded the slip and held it out to him. You call this investing? Mike looked at the slip. His face changed instantly. Color drained, leaving a ghostly pallor. His lips trembled. He looked at the slip, then at Rachel, and genuine terror reflected in his eyes. He went pale as if he'd seen a ghost. The ghost of his own lie, come to claim his soul. An overwhelming silence fell in the hallway. It felt as if one could hear dust settling on the floor. Mike stood like a statue, staring at the slip in Rachel's hand, his face whiter than chalk. Paula, not understanding what was happening, shifted her confused gaze from her son to her daughter-in-law. What is this? She finally managed to ask. What is this piece of paper? Rachel didn't answer. She didn't take her eyes off her husband. So this is where the money went, Mike. Her voice was calm, but in that calm was more steel than in the loudest scream. Not to a startup, not to crypto. To this. She snatched the slip from his weakened fingers and held it out to her mother-in-law. Take a look, Paula. Here are your son's unsuccessful investments. A bookmaker. Sports bets. $300,000 in the last month. Lost. Her mother-in-law grabbed the slip and brought it to her eyes. Her lips moved silently as she read. Then she slowly lowered her hand. Her face expressed complete bewilderment, which then turned into horror. Tyoma, is this true? She whispered, looking at her son. Mike stayed silent. He just stood there, head bowed, as if all his energy had suddenly left him. I'm asking, is this true? Paula's voice cracked into a shriek. Yes, he muttered. And at that moment, Rachel's world, which she thought was already shattered into a million tiny pieces. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a lie, cynical, calculated, rooted in her love and trust. He hadn't just gone into debt, he had lied to her, looking her in the eye. He let his mother humiliate her. He blackmailed her with divorce and his own health, so she would sell her only property to cover his shameful addiction. Rachel felt her legs buckle and leaned against the wall. She struggled to breathe. She looked at these two people, her gambling husband and his mother, who had just learned that her perfect son was a liar, and felt endlessly alone and deceived. So that's how it is, she whispered. That's how it is. She slid down the wall to the floor, hugging her knees. The tears she had held back for so long poured out in a torrent. These were not tears of pity or resentment. They were tears of despair, realizing what her life had become. She cried without shame, sobbing like a little girl who had lost her most precious treasure. She was not mourning money or an apartment. She was mourning 5 years of her life given to someone who didn't deserve her. mourning her faith in love, family, and partnership. All of it had been a lie. Mike stepped toward her, reaching out his hand. Rachel, don't touch me. She screamed through her tears. Don't you dare touch me. He recoiled as if struck. Paula seemed to snap out of her stupor. Her face contorted with rage, but this rage was no longer directed at her daughter-in-law. She turned to her son and slapped him hard across the face. You, gambler, you've shamed me, you've shamed our whole family. Mom, he stammered, holding his cheek. Silence. She hissed. I don't want to hear you. Massive debts from your bets, and I had to humiliate myself in front of her. You nodded at Rachel, begged for her, defended yourself, and it turns out you were just flushing money down the drain. The argument between mother and son raged directly above sobbing Rachel. They shouted at each other, blamed each other, justified themselves, but Rachel barely heard them. She was in her own hell. One thought echoed in her mind: why? Why was all this happening to her? For her love, her care, her devotion. She lifted her tear-streaked face and looked at them. They were so absorbed in their quarrel that they seemed to have forgotten she existed. And in that moment, she realized she had always been nothing but a function, a resource. To Mike, a convenient wife who creates comfort and can be deceived. To Paula, a foreign element, useful to save her son, and then discard when no longer needed. She slowly rose to her feet. The tears had dried, leaving salty streaks on her cheeks. Inside her, something clicked. The emotional breakdown gave way to a cold, ringing emptiness, scarier than any tantrum. Out, she said quietly. They fell silent and stared at her. What? Mike asked. Out, she repeated, louder this time, looking both of them in the eyes. Both of you, get out of my house. Rachel, you can't, Mike began. I can, she interrupted. This apartment was bought on a mortgage that I paid just as much as you do. Maybe more, considering your investments. But, unlike you, I have somewhere to go. And as far as I understand, you don't. So get out. You have 1 hour to pack your things. You have no right. Paula shrieked. He's your husband. He's my ex-husband, Rachel said firmly. As of this moment, I'm filing for divorce. And you, Paula, can take your gambling son and comfort him yourselves, without my help and without money from selling my apartment. She walked into the room, grabbed her phone from the nightstand, and dialed Olivia. Olivia, hi, you were right, she said into the phone, ignoring Mike and his mother frozen in the hallway. You were right about everything. I need a divorce, and I need you to help me throw them out of my life. Once and for all. After the call, Rachel felt her strength returning. Her friend's voice, businesslike and confident, hit her like a bucket of cold water. Okay, Rachel, stay calm, Olivia said. You did the most important thing, you learned the truth. Now we act by the law. They're still there? Rachel asked. Yes. Standing in the hallway, staring at me like ghosts. Perfect. Turn on the recorder on your phone. Discreetly. Let them talk. Every word they say can now be used against them. I'm coming to you. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Rachel did as her friend instructed. She placed the phone on the dresser, started recording, and returned to the hallway. Mike and Paula seemed to have collected themselves a bit and went on the counterattack. You'll regret this, Rachel, Mike began, trying to regain his former confidence. You're destroying the family over temporary difficulties. Temporary difficulties? Rachel sneered bitterly. 600,000 in debt and a gambling addiction, you call that temporary difficulties? I can quit. He exclaimed. I'll get treatment. Just don't leave, Rachel. Don't ruin everything. And what is there to ruin, Mike? She asked calmly but firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. You already destroyed everything with your lies, your betrayal. You lied to me every day. Every time I asked what happened, you looked me in the eye and lied. I was afraid of losing you. You didn't lose me now. You lost me the moment you took your first loan for your bets, when you decided your secret dirty obsession was more important than our family. How dare you speak to my son like that? Paula intervened again. He stumbled, everyone does. A real wife supports her husband, not finishes him off. Supports him, not closes her eyes to his lies and pays for his vices, Rachel cut in. I was ready to take $1 million loan and sell my grandmother's memory to save you, Mike. And you? Were you planning to keep gambling with my money? He fell silent. And that silence spoke louder than any words. I thought so, Rachel nodded. You have 50 minutes. She went to the kitchen and locked the door, leaving them in the hallway. Whispers could be heard, then Paula began to sob loudly, and Mike tried to console her. This performance no longer impressed Rachel in the slightest. She poured herself a glass of water and stared out the window, feeling a cold determination growing and hardening inside her. She was no longer a victim. She was a person reclaiming her life. Exactly 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Rachel opened it. Olivia was standing on the doorstep, and behind her were two burly men in security uniforms. And who's this? Mike exclaimed, taken aback. Support staff, Olivia replied calmly, walking into the apartment. Rachel hired them for her safety. Hello, Mike, Paula. I'm Olivia, Rachel's lawyer. As I understand it, you refused to leave voluntarily. This is his apartment too, Paula said. No, Olivia shook her head. This apartment is mortgaged, and Rachel is as much an owner as Mike. But at the moment, her life and health may be at risk. Therefore, as an owner, she has every right to ask you to leave. And you, Paula, aren't registered here at all, you're a guest, and guests are asked to leave. She spoke so clearly and confidently that Paula faltered for a moment. Okay, Olivia said, looking at her watch. You have 20 minutes left to pack. I suggest you don't delay. Otherwise, these young men, she nodded toward the security guards, will help you speed things up. Mike looked at his wife pleadingly. Rachel, please, don't do this. Let's talk. We already talked, she replied, not looking at him. Olivia, I want them out. Did you hear me? Paula realized the game was lost. With her face twisted in anger, she went to the bedroom and began pulling her son's things from the closet, throwing them into pre-prepared bags. Mike trailed behind her. While they packed, Olivia led Rachel to the kitchen. How are you? She asked quietly, hugging her friend. Fine, Rachel answered, surprised at her own calm. Strange, but I don't feel pain. Just emptiness. It will pass, Olivia promised. The main thing is, we'll get them out. Tomorrow we file for divorce and property division. What is there to divide? Rachel asked, surprised. The apartment is mortgaged. We divide the mortgage too. And the debts, Olivia smirked. By law, debts incurred during marriage are joint. But if we prove these debts were taken without your knowledge and spent not on family needs but on your husband's personal, shall we say, hobbies, the court may recognize them as Mike's personal debts. And that slip? Rachel asked. The slip is circumstantial evidence. We'll need statements from his bank cards. I think we can get them through a court request. And the recording, that's the cherry on top. They confessed themselves, both about the debts and about pressuring you. So our prospects are good. Half an hour later, Mike and his mother stood in the hallway with their bags. I won't let this go, Paula hissed, looking at Rachel with hatred. You'll regret this. I don't think so, Rachel replied calmly. Mike stayed silent. He looked at his wife with a long, heavy gaze filled with a mix of hurt, guilt, and some childish confusion. Then he turned and went to the door. When the door closed behind them, Rachel breathed deeply. For the first time in weeks, she felt she could breathe freely. That's it, Olivia said. First round is ours. What's next? Next is a new life, her friend smiled. But first, let's have some champagne. I happen to have a bottle in the car for special occasions. And today is a truly special occasion, your day of liberation. They sat in the kitchen, drinking champagne straight from the bottle like in their college days, and laughed. Rachel laughed for the first time in a long while. It was the laughter of a person who had been through hell but survived and found the strength to start over. The next month turned into a battle of attrition. As Olivia had predicted, Mike and his mother weren't going to give up easily. They hired a lawyer, a grizzled, unpleasant man with darting eyes, who flooded the court with motions and complaints. They claimed that Rachel knew about the debts and approved her husband's investments, that she herself was a gambler who provoked him, and that she had kicked him out of the only home, leaving him without means to live. Nonsense, Olivia commented, flipping through the papers. They're trying to drag out the process and wear you down emotionally. Classic tactic, ignore them. But ignoring it was not easy. Paula launched a furious campaign on social media. She posted about her unfortunate son, left homeless by a predatory, calculating daughter-in-law, driven to the brink of a nervous breakdown. She called mutual acquaintances, spinning heartfelt stories. Some believed her. A few family friends of Rachel's turned away. Sarah called me yesterday, Rachel told Olivia, referring to one of their mutual friends. She said I was cruel, that I should have supported my husband, not undermined him. Sarah is an idiot. Olivia snapped. Her husband cheats on her, and she tolerates it. So she's projecting her own situation onto you. Strong women always irritate those who've chosen the role of victim. Don't worry about her. And Rachel tried. She threw herself into work, took on new projects, and engaged with clients. Work distracted her and gave her a sense of control over her life. She changed the locks on the apartment, as Olivia advised, and each time she turned a new key in the door, she felt like the master of her fortress. The hardest part was proving that Mike took out loans for gambling. His lawyer claimed the money went toward family needs, repairs, buying appliances, vacations. We need proof, Olivia said. Statements from his accounts. Through the court, they obtained Mike's bank statements for the past year. When Olivia brought the printouts, Rachel felt her vision darken. Nearly every day, money from his accounts went to various online casinos and bookmakers. Tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. At the same time, there were expenses in expensive restaurants and designer stores. Looks like your husband was living a double life, Olivia observed, spreading the papers on the table. By day a modest manager, by night a partygoer and gambler. But where did he get the money for the restaurants? Rachel asked, puzzled. He took out loans to cover his losses. Now that's the most interesting question, Olivia said thoughtfully. I think it wasn't just his salary. The truth came unexpectedly. One evening, Rachel was sorting through old documents in a desk drawer and came across a copy of an inheritance certificate. 2 years ago, Paula had sold a dacha left by her parents. At the time, she claimed the money had been put in the bank for old age. Rachel called her friend. Can we request statements from my mother-in-law's accounts? Harder, but possible. Why? Rachel shared her suspicion. 2 weeks later, they had the new documents, and everything fell into place. Paula didn't just know about her son's gambling, she was funding it. Money from the sale of the dacha, about $3 million, gradually flowed into Mike's accounts. She gave him money, hoping he would win it back and repay the debt. And when the money ran out, they together devised a plan to force Rachel to sell her apartment. "This is monstrous," Rachel whispered, staring at the papers. She wasn't saving him, she was his accomplice. Worse, Olivia corrected. She was the director of this whole performance. And you were supposed to be the sponsor of the second act. On the day of the decisive court hearing, Rachel was completely calm. She knew the truth was on her side. Everyone was present in the courtroom: Mike, his mother, and their lawyer. They looked confident, apparently hoping Rachel had no solid evidence. When the judge, a strict woman around 50, gave Olivia the floor, she methodically began to dismantle their defense point by point. She presented Mike's bank statements, proving his gambling expenditures. She submitted the recording, where Mike and his mother pressured Rachel to sell her personal property. Mike and his lawyer tried to object, claiming the recording was illegal and that the statements proved nothing. "And this, Your Honor," Olivia said, pausing, "explains how an unemployed retiree and a mid-level manager suddenly had millions for investments." She placed Paula's bank statements on the judge's desk, showing transfers to her son. Silence fell over the courtroom. Mike's lawyer looked confused. Paula gripped her handbag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Mike lowered his head, hiding his eyes. "The court understands everything clearly," the judge said after a long pause. And then Rachel decided to strike the final blow. She asked for the floor. "Your Honor," she began, rising from her seat. Her voice was firm and clear. "I want to say that all this time my now former husband and his mother were not just lying, they were performing a play. They portrayed him as a victim of circumstances, and me as a heartless wife." She turned to Mike and his mother. "You wanted me to save the family, but we had no family. There was a team of two, you, who used me. You, Paula, didn't raise a man, you raised an infantile gambler and indulged his vices. And you, Mike, you are not just a liar, you are a traitor. You betrayed my love, my trust, 5 years of our life together." She stepped forward. "You demanded that I sell the apartment left to me by my grandmother, the only person who truly loved me, without conditions. You wanted me to give up her memory to pay off your dirty debts." She looked Mike straight in the eyes. "So I want you to know, I will sell this apartment." A flicker of hope appeared on Mike's and his mother's faces. "But not to save you," Rachel finished, "but to start a new life. Without you, without your debts, and without your mother. And I demand that all debts you incurred during our marriage but spent on your vices be recognized as your personal obligations. We will divide the mortgage, and I am confident the court will account for whose contributions were real and whose went to gambling." The courtroom was not a theater, but at that moment, it felt as if a curtain had fallen with a deafening crash. The judge, maintaining an impassive expression, nodded. "The court will retire to deliberate." Rachel returned to her seat, feeling her hands tremble. Olivia, squeezing her hand encouragingly, whispered, "You did it. You just destroyed them." Rachel shook her head. "I didn't destroy them, I just told the truth," she replied. And that was scarier than any destruction. The wait for the verdict felt like an eternity. She sat, staring at a single point, replaying her speech in her mind. Every word spoken in that courtroom was hard-earned, born from pain and disappointment. She regretted nothing. For the first time in a long while, she felt not like a victim, but as the master of her own destiny. Mike and his mother sat on their bench, hunched over, as if under an invisible blow. Paula whispered something angrily into her son's ear, but he seemed not to hear her. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped like a man who had lost everything. Finally, the door opened, and the judge entered. Everyone stood. She began reading the decision in a monotone, emotionless voice. But to Rachel, each word sounded like music. "The marriage is dissolved. Debts incurred by Mike for purposes not related to family needs, specifically for gambling, are recognized as his personal obligations. Jointly acquired property, namely the two-room apartment under mortgage, shall be divided as follows: after its sale and repayment of the remaining mortgage debt, the remaining funds shall be divided equally between the spouses. The judge paused, lifted her eyes, and looked first at Mike, then at Rachel. The court also finds it necessary to note, her voice became slightly less formal, that attempts to exert moral and psychological pressure on one spouse to seize their personal property are unacceptable. A family is built on trust and mutual support, not manipulation and deceit. She struck the gavel. Court adjourned. That is all. Rachel slowly sank onto the bench, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had won. No, not just her, truth had won. Let's go. Olivia gently tugged her by the hand. There's nothing more for us to do here. They left the courtroom and stepped into the corridor. Mike and his mother followed. Rachel, wait, Mike called. She stopped and turned. He approached, and in his eyes there was no anger, only confusion and some belated plea. Could it be didn't 5 years mean anything? He asked quietly. They meant nothing, Rachel replied just as quietly. They meant nothing until you turned them into lies. Goodbye, Mike. She turned to leave, but Paula blocked her path. Her face was twisted with rage. Are you still going to cry? She hissed. Do you think you've won? You'll end up alone. No one wants someone like you. And my son will still find a decent woman who will appreciate him. Rachel looked at her with a long, calm gaze. I'm not alone anymore, Paula. I have myself, and it turns out that's more than enough. As for your son, I can only feel sorry for him. With a mother like you, it will truly be very hard for him to find his happiness. She took Olivia's arm, and they walked toward the exit, leaving the former mother-in-law and ex-husband standing in the middle of the hallway like two monuments to their own defeat. They sat in a small, cozy cafe not far from the courthouse. Rachel held a cup of hot chocolate in her hands, and her fingers no longer trembled. Did you see their faces? Olivia laughed. The lawyer's jaw practically hit the floor when I laid out Paula's bank statements. He thought she was a poor pensioner. I don't even feel sorry for them, admitted Rachel. That's strange. That's normal, Olivia replied seriously. You have the right to your feelings. They caused you too much pain. Sympathy may come later, maybe. Or maybe not, and that's fine too. They were silent. Rachel watched people outside the window, rushing cars, gray autumn trees. Life went on. Her personal disaster was just a tiny song in the vast ocean of human fates. What will you do now? Olivia asked. Sell? Sell, Rachel replied firmly. Both apartments. Olivia raised her eyebrows in surprise. The mortgaged one? Yes. I don't want anything tying me to that place. I'll sell it, sell my grandmother's, pay off the mortgage, and divide the remaining money with Mike, as the court decided. And with my share in the money for my grandmother's apartment, I'll buy something new, my own place, where his ghost won't exist. That's the right decision, Olivia nodded. To start completely fresh. That's when Rachel smiled for the first time in a long while, with a clean slate. She took out her phone and found the contact of the realtor her mother had once worked with. Hello, this is Lucas. My name is Rachel Smith. My mother recommended you. I have a business proposal. I want to sell 2 apartments. Yes, as soon as possible. She spoke on the phone while Olivia watched her with admiration. This was no longer the scared, confused Rachel who had called her in tears a month ago. This was a strong, confident woman who knew exactly what she wanted and would never again let anyone decide how she should live. A year passed. Boston greeted autumn not with rain, but with piercing blue skies and golden foliage. Rachel stood on the balcony of her new apartment, drinking her morning coffee. It was a small but bright studio with panoramic windows overlooking a park. She had bought it 6 months earlier, after all the old property had been sold. Everything went exactly as she had planned. The mortgaged 2-bedroom and her grandmother's 1-bedroom were sold quickly and profitably. She honestly paid off the remaining debt to the bank and transferred half of the remaining sum to Mike. He accepted the money silently, without a word of thanks. Rachel hadn't expected any. With the remaining funds, she bought this studio and renovated it to her taste: bright walls, minimalist furniture, plenty of air and greenery. She immersed herself completely in work. Word of mouth did its job, and she now had a line of clients. She designed logos for trendy cafes, created illustrations for children's books, and developed website designs. Her income doubled, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly independent. She wasn't looking for a new relationship. She was happy on her own: quiet evenings with a book, walks in the park, meetings with friends. This calm, measured life was exactly what she needed after the storm she had endured. Sometimes she heard rumors about Mike. Olivia, who had acquaintances in legal circles, told her that his debts hadn't disappeared. The money he got from the apartment sale only covered part of his loans. Debt collectors still called him. He had moved out from his mother's and rented a tiny room on the outskirts. Eventually, he was fired from work, not because of debts, but because he had completely lost interest in his job and became distracted and unreliable. Once, Rachel happened to see him on the street. He was walking hunched over in an old, worn jacket. It was hard to recognize in this dejected man the polished, self-assured Mike she had once loved. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In his eyes, she saw fear and shame. He quickly looked away and disappeared into the crowd, almost running. Rachel felt neither gloating nor satisfaction, only a light, gentle sadness that things could have been different. As for Paula, her life didn't get any sweeter either. The son she had pinned all her hopes on turned out to be not a support, but a constant problem. Rumor had it that she sold her apartment to help him pay off the most urgent debts and now lived with her sister under her roof. Her dreams of babysitting grandchildren and running her son's household had collapsed. Fate punished her in the cruelest way, leaving her alone with the consequences of her own intrigues and manipulations. Rachel finished her coffee and returned to her room. On her desk lay a new graphics tablet. She had bought it with the fee from a major project. Next to it was a sketch, an illustration for a fairy tale about a princess who defeated the dragon on her own, without the help of a prince. Rachel smiled. That story was a little about her. She sat at the desk, turned on some music, and picked up her stylus. A new day lay ahead, full of work, plans, and hopes. She was no longer afraid of the future. She knew she could handle any challenge because the worst was already behind her. She had learned the most important thing: to value and respect herself. And she understood that a real family is not those who demand sacrifices from you, but those who are willing to sacrifice something for you. She looked out the window. A ray of sunlight pierced through the foliage and fell on her desk in a warm patch. Life was beautiful, and this life belonged to her alone. She was free, and that was the greatest wealth she had ever had. If you believe that every woman has the right to her own happiness and respect, give this story a like. Write in the comments what true strength of spirit means to you and whether you could, like Rachel, start over with a clean slate.